Descend hard, descend!
(11:35 p.m.)
AEF 1135.
The Airbus crew have finally made contact with Friedrichshafen Airport.
Can we go, Friedrichshafen?
Nielsen can now hand over the plane.
Affirm. Bye-bye. BTC 2937. BTC 2937. BTC 2937.
Burning wreckage falls from the sky near Überlingen, Germany. At daybreak, the police launched the biggest operation the area has ever seen. Firefighters have put out the blazing debris. Rescuers must begin the grim task of looking for bodies.
The aeroplanes crashed down and all people inside are died.
Within days, the victims' families arrive at the scene. Among them is Zulfat Hamatov, father of 11-year-old Artur.
Через 2 дня мы полетели в Германию. Это был шок. Мы все были в шоке.
It was a shock. Many parents were fainting when we saw the broken plane wings, the broken tail. We still hoped that these children would run in, appear from somewhere, and probably every parent believed in some miracle.
Vitaly Kaloyev flies in from Barcelona, holding out for news that his wife and children were not on the flight.
One has to be certain. Maybe it was not my aircraft that crashed. Maybe something else had happened. Who can know without proof?
Investigators confirm his worst fears. 71 people on board the 2 planes are now confirmed dead. It is the worst civilian aircraft accident that Germany has ever seen. In an industry protected by multiple and highly advanced safety systems, how could this happen? Now, by rewinding the events of that day, and by going deep into the investigation,
Traffic.
we can reveal the calamitous chain of events that brought 2 planes to exactly the same spot at exactly the same time. Investigators from the BFU, Germany's Federal Bureau of Aircraft Accident Investigation, are called to the scene. Jens Friedemann is put in charge of the crash site.
Die Untersuchung eines Flugunfalls.
The investigation of an air accident is like a forensic investigation, a crime scene. One wants to establish the facts.
Crime scene.
At the accident site, we start in total chaos. There's wreckage lying around everywhere.
Also da liegen viele Wrackteile.
Friedemann can take nothing for granted. Not even that the 2 planes collided.
Two aircraft were in the air. Whether they had collided or just flown past each other too close and lost control, or something like that, we just didn't know.
Without the black boxes, Friedemann must try to work out what happened by examining the shattered fragments of wreckage. Key pieces are brought to a specialized storage facility in northern Germany. To Friedemann's eye, the mangled metal soon tells a clear story.
The Boeing made contact with the Tupolev in one spot. The vertical tail section was broken off. The Tupolev was damaged around the left wing and on the left-hand side of the fuselage. There was also evidence of a collision on the underside of the right wing.
The wreckage reveals that the DHL cargo plane and the Bashkirian charter did collide mid-air.
We now know what happened. The question is, why did it happen? How could it happen that they got so close?
At the crash site, amidst the fragmented pieces of the two planes, investigators have finally found what they've been looking for: the black boxes from both planes.
This was very important for us as accident investigators.
The BFU's Johann Reuss joins the investigation. It is his job to analyze the contents of the recorders.
The cockpit voice recorders help us understand what happened in the cockpit, how the pilots reach their decisions.
Reuss begins by examining the pilot's traffic collision avoidance system, TCAS.
Our first question was to establish whether TCAS had worked the way it was intended to, the way it was designed.
TCAS builds a three-dimensional map around an aircraft using its altitude, speed, and heading. All planes fitted with TCAS constantly transmit this information to each other. If planes get too close to one another, TCAS warns the pilots.
Traffic, traffic.
And if necessary, gives them what is called a resolution advisory.
Descend, descend.
Examining the black box, Reuss quickly establishes that the system had worked the way it was supposed to.
Traffic, traffic.
Before the collision, both TCAS systems generated and displayed a resolution advisory. The Russian Tupolev was instructed to climb, and the DHL Boeing to descend.
If the aircraft had followed these instructions, there would have been no collision. But while the pilots of the DHL plane obeyed TCAS,
descend, descend,
the Russian crew did not.
Climb, climb.
Experts from the United States are headed to the scene of the deadly mid-air collision of two aircraft in southern Germany.
The Überling and mid-air collision is now world news. The media are speculating freely and looking for someone to blame.
The pilot of the Russian plane is said to have ignored repeated instructions from air traffic controllers.
Why did the TCAS device meant to avoid collisions, in this case maybe help cause one? And why didn't the Russian plane descend when first ordered? A language problem? Controller commands are always in English.
Black box recordings quickly eliminate one theory.
Zurich, good evening. BTC 2937, level 360.
With the cockpit voice recorder, we were able to establish that language was not the problem. The Russian crew understood English perfectly well.
But the recorders reveal a surprising fact.
Climb. This is climb.
He's getting us down.
We noticed that there was an instruction from the air traffic controller.
BTC 2937, descent flight level 350.
And we found that at the same time, or immediately afterwards, there was also a TCAS advisory.
Climb.
At almost exactly the same time, the Russian pilots were instructed to do two completely different things.
Descent flight level 350, expedite.
Now the crew needs to make a very, very fast decision. What do they do next? And we discovered that the crew had extreme difficulty in making this decision.
But it should have been straightforward. The two planes were flying over Germany, and European regulations clearly state that TCAS has priority over air traffic controllers.
For me, there was absolutely no explanation why something like this would happen.
Climb.
Why didn't the crew use TCAS the way it could and should be used?
By April 2001, TCAS was mandatory in most of the world. But investigators discover one notable exception: Russia. Could it be that the Russian crew did not know how to use TCAS? Rustam Mustafin is a former Bashkirian pilot. He confirms that even though not standard for domestic flights, planes flying overseas were specially fitted with TCAS.
As soon as the TCAS requirement was introduced, the training school of Bashkirian Airlines ensured that our pilots were trained to use the system.
Mustafin regularly flew with the pilots of flight BTC 2937.
By the time of the disaster, we had acquired extensive experience using it.
The crew knew how TCAS worked, but ignored its instructions. The Tupolev's flight manual, the pilot's operational Bible, reveals why.
We learned from these manuals that the orders from air traffic control always have a higher priority.
The operations manual at the time stated that the Air Traffic Control Command was to be given precedence over TCAS in the event of the system issuing an alert. It said that the air traffic control had the final authority.
Contrary to European regulations, the Russian crew were trained to use TCAS only as an advisory system and could choose to follow the controller's instructions if they wanted. They were following TCAS regulations, but Russian style.
I would have done exactly what these guys did. I would have carried out the air traffic control command.
Suddenly, we were able to understand why the crew acted the way they did.
Investigators have discovered why both planes were in descent. While the DHL crew had followed TCAS, the Russian pilots obeyed air traffic control. But this doesn't answer a more basic question. TCAS is meant as a system of last resort. The planes shouldn't be close enough even to trigger it in the first place. Investigators have turned their attention to the air traffic control room. A controller must advise pilots to change altitude at least 2 minutes before a potential conflict. But Peter Nielsen didn't tell the Russian crew to descend until just 43 seconds before collision.
BTC 2937, descent.
Why did the air traffic controller issue the separation order so late? So late that the danger of an accident actually existed.
Through shift logs and interviews, investigators learned that Nielsen was the only air traffic controller on duty on the night of July the 1st. Official Skyguide policy is to have a minimum of 2 air traffic controllers on duty at any given time. Investigators learn that it had become standard procedure at Skyguide for one controller to go on an extended break during the night shift. Tom Larsen was a close friend of Nielsen's, working alongside him for many years.
The way that Peter was doing night shift, we did that all the time. There would only be one controller because there was very little traffic.
Between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m., there are no scheduled landings at any of the airports in the area. But then, at about 11:25 on July the 1st, 2002, Nielsen is presented with an unexpected landing.
There was an approach into Friedrichshafen Airport, which he had to coordinate.
It's very unusual that one aircraft comes at that time for Friedrichshafen. I guess that the controller was a little surprised about that.
Regulations state that Nielsen must contact the airport control tower before bringing the delayed plane in for landing. This should be routine. One push of a button and the phone connects directly to the Friedrichshafen tower. But records show that Nielsen can't get